I live in a pretty average suburban neighborhood. Think cookie-cutter houses, trimmed lawns, and the kind of people who wave at you when you drive by but don't really know you. I moved in with my boyfriend, Mark, about 2 years ago. We're both in our late 20s, no kids, just enjoying the peace of not having to share walls with college roommates anymore. Enter Karen. Of course, that's not her real name, but I swear she could be the poster child for the term. She lives directly across the street with her husband and 2 kids. The husband seems like a quiet, tired guy who just goes along with whatever she says, and the kids are honestly fine, but she. Oh boy. The first time I interacted with her was literally the week we moved in. We were unloading boxes from the U-Haul when she strutted over, sunglasses perched on her head, iced coffee in hand, and introduced herself. I thought, cool, neighborly welcome. Except her welcome was basically a list of rules she expected us to follow if we were going to live across from her. I'm not exaggerating. She told us we needed to keep our garbage cans behind the fence, never in front, because it ruins the aesthetic of the street. She said she doesn't like it when cars are parked on the curb because her kids need space to play safely. And she casually slipped in that she has a homeowners association type group, even though there's no official HOA here. Mark and I just kind of nodded, because what do you even say when someone you just met starts rattling off demands? We figured maybe she was just intense, and we'd learn to laugh it off. Fast forward a few months, and the small annoyances turned into a full-on saga. For example, one evening Mark had a couple of his co-workers over for beers on the porch. We weren't loud, just talking and laughing like normal adults. At around 9:30 p.m., Karen storms across the street and tells us to keep it down because her kids had school in the morning. Which, fine, I get that kids need sleep, but it wasn't even late. Plus, her house is across the street. If our normal conversation volume is reaching her kids' bedrooms, that's more on her window insulation than us. But the wildest thing she did early on was about our dog. We have a rescue mutt, Bella, who is basically the sweetest dog ever. She barks maybe twice a day, usually at squirrels. Well, one afternoon, Bella was lying in the yard on her leash when Karen came marching over and told me dogs weren't allowed to be outside unsupervised. I pointed out that I was literally standing in the yard gardening. She doubled down, saying she meant without offense. Like, what? She then suggested we should consider rehoming Bella if we couldn't provide a proper setup. I was so stunned I couldn't even form words for a second. I just told her Bella wasn't going anywhere, and she stormed back to her house muttering something about people these days. Mark and I started realizing we needed to be careful, because she seemed like the type to escalate small things. And we were right. The real breaking point, at least, the first big one, came last summer. Mark bought a used motorcycle, nothing crazy, just a second-hand Yamaha he'd wanted since college. He rides it maybe twice a week, always respectfully, not revving it at midnight or anything. But the day he rolled it off the trailer, Karen appeared on our driveway like she had been waiting for it. She launched into this whole speech about how motorcycles are death traps and that she refuses to let her children grow up listening to that racket. She actually said, "You're going to have to store that somewhere else." Like it was her decision. Mark, bless his patience, just smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll keep it quiet." That wasn't enough for her. She kept pushing, saying if he had to ride it, he should only do it during business hours so her family wouldn't be disturbed. Of course, the first weekend he took it out around 11 a.m., she stood at the end of her driveway with her arms crossed, glaring at him like he had personally run over her mailbox. Things escalated even further when she started leaving passive-aggressive notes in our mailbox. Things like, "Please be mindful of noise, some of us work early mornings," or "Trash day is Wednesday, not Tuesday, your bins were out too soon." Which, by the way, wasn't even true. We put them out the night before like everyone else. At one point, Mark joked we should start a bingo card for her behavior. Complains about noise before 10 p.m. Mentions her kids' safety when it has nothing to do with them. Suggests we change something on our property. Writes another note. We laughed, but honestly it was getting under my skin. I hate confrontation, but I also hate being walked on. And then, the barbecue incident happened. That's where I'll leave this part, because it's long, but let me just say, it involved half the neighborhood, Karen yelling about smoke pollution, and me realizing she wasn't just quirky, she was going to make living here a nightmare if we didn't figure out how to handle her. So, the infamous barbecue incident. It was a Saturday in mid-July, one of those perfect summer days where the sun isn't too brutal, and everyone on the block seems to migrate outdoors. Mark and I decided to finally host a little cookout. We invited some friends, a couple of my coworkers, and even texted two of the neighbors we'd actually grown friendly with. Nothing huge, maybe 12 people total. We set up in the backyard with a bar grill, some folding chairs, music playing low from a Bluetooth speaker. Bella was happily sprawled in the shade, people had drinks in hand, and for once, everything felt normal. About 30 minutes in, I noticed Karen standing on her porch across the street. Arms folded. Watching. My stomach sank, because I knew she was calculating her approach. Sure enough, right as Mark was flipping burgers, she stormed over. No greeting, no hey, what's up? She launched straight into, you can't have open flames this close to our houses. It's a safety hazard. I kid you not. Mark calmly pointed out that literally everyone in the neighborhood grills in their backyard during summer. Heck, her own husband had a gas grill I'd seen him use. She snapped back that our grill was producing too much smoke and her kids were sensitive. Now here's the kicker, some of the invited neighbors were already there, standing in our yard with plates of chips in their hands, looking at her like she was unhinged. One of them, this older guy named Tom, actually said, Karen, we all do barbecues. Nobody cares. You'd think maybe hearing it from another neighbor would shut her down, but nope. She doubled down. She started shouting about air quality and how the smell of burning meat was disgusting. Meanwhile, her husband grills steaks every other weekend. I tried to de-escalate, saying, Karen, you're welcome to go inside if the smoke bothers you. We'll be done in a couple hours. Wrong thing to say. She snapped, so you're admitting you plan to pollute the neighborhood for hours? At this point, people were staring. Some of our friends were clearly uncomfortable, like what the hell is going on here? Mark finally said firmly, Karen, we're having a barbecue. That's all. Please go home. And then, this part is almost funny in hindsight, she threatened to call the fire department. For a normal backyard grill. I guess she realized how ridiculous she sounded because she stomped off before actually making the call, but the damage was done. The mood was soured. People whispered about her the rest of the night. Later, one of my coworkers pulled me aside and said, how do you live across from that? Honestly, I didn't have a good answer. The aftermath was even worse. The next morning, we found another note in our mailbox. This one was 2 full pages, typed, with bullet points. She accused us of being disrespectful to the neighborhood, creating health hazards, and setting a poor example for the children on the street. She even wrote that if we couldn't adapt to community standards, maybe this wasn't the right place for us to live. That's when it hit me, she wasn't just going to be an occasional annoyance. She had decided we were her project. Mark wanted to just ignore her, but I couldn't. I started documenting everything, dates, times, what she said, even snapping pictures of the notes. Because honestly, it felt like only a matter of time before she tried to escalate to something official. And I wasn't wrong. A couple weeks later, 2 police officers knocked on our door. Apparently, Karen had filed a noise complaint. The officers were polite but clearly uncomfortable, like they knew it was a waste of time. They told us the complaint mentioned constant loud motorcycle revving, parties at all hours, and animal disturbances. We explained, showed them Bella literally napping quietly in the living room, and even offered to let them listen to the bike, which they didn't care to. They apologized and left, saying unless there was actual evidence, there wasn't much to pursue. But that was the moment my patience snapped. It wasn't just annoying anymore, she was actively lying to authorities about us. We talked to the other neighbors, and apparently, we weren't the only ones she'd targeted. One family said she yelled at their teenage son for playing basketball in his own driveway because the bouncing was disruptive. Another said she once threatened to call CPS because their toddler had a tantrum outside and she thought they were neglecting him. It was like she had a pattern, pick a target, nitpick them to death, and escalate if they didn't fold. The neighbors started banding together after that. A small but growing group of us agreed to watch each other's backs. If Karen filed another complaint, we'd back each other up with statements. Tom, the guy who'd spoken up at the barbecue, even said, we've let her bully people too long. Enough's enough. And here's the weirdest twist, her own husband cornered Mark in the driveway one evening and quietly apologized. He said something like, I don't agree with her, but it's easier if I don't argue. That broke my heart a little. He looked exhausted, like this was his whole life. Since then, things have been tense but quieter. Karen still glares every time Mark starts the motorcycle, still leaves snide comments if our garbage bins are out an hour too early, But after the police thing didn't stick, she seems a bit deflated. We're documenting everything, just in case, and we've talked about maybe installing cameras, not only for her but just general peace of mind. But I swear, living across from her feels like living under surveillance. Every time I step outside, I catch her blinds twitching. I can't tell if she's waiting for us to slip up or if she just genuinely has nothing better to do. Anyway, that's where we're at now. It's exhausting, honestly. Has anyone else dealt with a Karen neighbor like this? Do you think ignoring her is the best strategy, or should we be more proactive before she tries something bigger?